Hi Lisa, thanks for asking the question about the rounded back adjustment with a raglan top. Sorry for not getting back to you sooner, but I did try this out and it wasn't successful the first time. So I wanted to rework it before I got back to you and do a quick video to explain my thought process and how I've got on. So forgive me for being in my scruff, and it's a bit of a kind of impromptu video really, just because I wanted to do this before I went away in case you wanted to use it and just give you the information that you'd asked for. So I've taken two patterns to use in my example that I'm going to show you, and they're both tilly in the button patterns, just because then I know that they're fairly similar, but it's just to give you the idea of the principle. And I've used the Frankie top, the Frankie t-shirt, which is a raglan sleeve, and then the Freya top, which is a normal kind of round neck with a fitted sleeve, a set-in sleeve. So I thought it might be useful to just see how I got to the adjustment that I've come out with. And I tried this on, initially I tried an adjustment on the Glenelly top by Itch to Stitch, and I found that it didn't really work. And what happened was that it basically just ruched up at the back of my neck and just increased the volume on my neck, and it didn't really give me the adjustment that I needed in the back. And that's how I kind of came to this conclusion. So a couple of things to think about. If your rounding is very much kind of a hunch in the top, in the sort of center part of your back, in the middle section here and near the very top, then that will determine the position that you use to draw the adjustment. If, like me, as I've now realized, mine is actually more just above my shoulder blade, so I've got kind of muscles sticking out just on my shoulder blade here, so it's slightly further down and slightly further out from the center of the back. So depending on where the position is, depends on where you're going to want the extra volume, and that does really impact the place where you're going to put the adjustment. So I'm going to go through that with you so you can see on the two patterns, and then if you've got any questions after that, then you can let me know. Okay. So I'm just going to transfer my camera so you can see my kind of desk. So let me just swap this over. Okay, so what I've got here was I thought it'd be useful to see how a raglan sleeve is made in terms of how it varies from a standard pattern, because obviously we've done the adjustment on a normal pattern. So this is underneath here, I've got the Freya bodice, and you'll notice that we've got the neck, the centre back here, the shoulder here, and then around this corner here, we've got the armhole. Okay, and if you were doing your typical round back adjustment on here, depending on where you wanted to make your adjustment, you would draw a line from the centre back out to the armhole. You would cut here, and then you would also draw a line either from the neckline to create the dart, or into the shoulder to create the dart. So you'll have seen that on the previous videos. Okay, so my rounding, so when I was talking about where your rounding is, if your rounding is kind of more in this center area here, then you're going to want to usually maybe take the dart into the neck, and you might not need to come down as far when it works to draw the line to make your adjustment. But for me, it's kind of more in this area here. So where my shoulder blades are, a few inches from the center back, and probably about 4 or 5 inches down actually from the shoulder. And so for me, what I found was with when I made the adjustment in the raglan, the way that it was suggested in the book, it made the adjustment really more in this area up here. And all that happened for me was it just moved the back neck up, and I just got ruching around the back neck, and it was still pulling across my back shoulder and the back here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So if I overlay on this one, then I'll fold this back out so it's a bit cleaner to see. So I'm going to overlay on this the back bodice from the Frankie t-shirt, which is a raglan. And what you'll notice here is, if I just line the centre backs up, just to give you the idea, what we're doing when we create a raglan sleeve, So you'll notice it almost matches identically the back neck. And then this is the seam allowance, which is the adjustment here. And then it would normally go around here. So we've got a line from the back neck here out to just below the double notch on the armhole. And then that carries through down to the bottom. In this case, we've allowed a bit of extra, again, with a raglan sleeve. They usually allow a bit more room in the underarm so that you've got a bit more movement because you've not got the shaping in the shoulder. So on that, then the sleeve would then fit on this section here. And so this part of the shoulder, so this whole triangular section here is what then goes on, that kind of becomes the sleeve. And we lose this shoulder seam here. It joins it to the front bodice. So we take part of the front bodice as well. And that's what creates that kind of triangular shaped sleeve. I'm just going to find my sleeve pattern. Where did I put that? Yeah. So this is the kind of back of the raglan sleeve. So you'll notice that this portion of the shoulder gets rolled into the sleeve, and your normal sleeve shape would, your normal sleeve head, sorry, move this down. Your normal sleeve head would usually come round here, but we're adding on that extra section from the back bodice. So instead of going round here, we're adding on this kind of like triangular piece to the top. It's not quite like this because you've got a bit of a kind of gap in the middle, but you get a sense of this was the original sleeve shape, and then we're adding in this kind of piece that we're taking out of the top part of the arm there. So we're taking out this whole triangle here, sticking it onto the curve of the sleeve. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, what I want to show you is I'm going to draw that out, and then I'm going to show you how we make the adjustment. Move this bit of the paper out of the way. Okay, so if you imagine now then that we've got our sleeve, our bodice here, and so I've drawn the full bodice as we would make it normally, the rounded back adjustment, and then I've marked on where our raglan sleeve line is, so you get a sense of what we're going to do. Is we're going to do it first on the back bodice, then I'm going to show you the impact and then how you can make the adjustments to your sleeve pattern and your back. Okay, so so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this out so you can see. So this is just a kind of scaled version. So I'm going to do it as if it was my back, because this is the harder adjustment. The easier one is if your rounding is in this section here, you can just make the adjustment in the back, and I'll show you that just at the end. But this one's the one that's kind of, this is what, it didn't really work for me first time doing that. So this is why I've done a bit more like a second step really. So my adjustment needs to be sort of, if you imagine it's going to be in this area, we want to add the extra volume. So I'm going to mark my line, my cutting line here into the armhole. And you see it dissects the line that would be the raglan sleeve on this particular image. Okay, and then I'm going to draw my, I normally use my dart into the shoulder. So I'm going to draw my line here, my cutting line like that. So you can see these two lines both dissect the sleeve side, what's going to become the raglan sleeve. And so as well as making an adjustment to the back, we probably will want to make an adjustment to the sleeve. Okay, so what you would normally do then is cut your out to your armhole. And a good tip I saw recently was to cut to where the seam allowance is, and then cut from the other side to create the hinge, so you actually get the adjustment on the seam allowance. Okay, and then similarly we're going to cut down from the neckline, from the shoulder in this case, to create the dart that's going to create our opening. Right, so hopefully you can see that. So what we're going to do is same as we would do on a standard back adjustment. Stick a piece of paper under here. hopefully you can see this okay. So normally what we would do is we would mark our centre back, stick it on our paper. I'll mark my centre back here. Then I would make my adjustment however big I want that to be, and I would stick that down on there, and as you can see then it would open out the dart in this area. Okay, so let's just do that. See this example. Okay, so it all seems straightforward so far, and I'm just going to stick down these parts as well. We'll need those in a moment. Okay, so if we cut that out again as if we were doing our normal back, just going to roughly cut down here. Okay, so all kind of hunky-dory there now. So I don't know if you can see it very well, but this is the line, the bottom line of the cut, and then this is the new gap that we've got in place here, and then we've got our dart legs that would be here. All right, so now what you'll notice is the line that would have been our raglan sleeve has kind of opened up in this area here, so I couldn't cut straight from here to here. What I would need to do is, so what we're doing actually is adding some more volume in this area. And this is the bit that I missed out when I just did the back adjustment in here. So the first time I tried it, I did it further up, and I just did, if you imagine this is just the back piece, I just did the adjustment on the back piece. And what I found was that it was pulling still across my shoulder. And I think what I hadn't done was made this allowance here. So what I kind of deduced from that was that on my centre back, on my back piece, sorry, as well as making this adjustment, I also need to round out, again, probably only by maybe 1/4 of an inch at this point here, or the equivalent of where this point would be. And so I need to add a bit more length firstly, and then a bit more room, so kind of rounding that out slightly to give a bit more volume onto the back. So for my back piece, I would make the centre back adjustment, and I'll do this again on just the back piece, but what it's going to end up looking like then is more like, oops, and you could do this by just sticking, like I've done, on your raglan piece. You could just stick a piece of A4 paper, draw it out as if it was a full sleeve, make your adjustments, and then just chop that bit back off, and then you'll get a sense of how big you want the adjustment to be. So it's subtle, but it does make a difference having this extra distance to go over. If you imagine, the fabric's got to go over that curve, and so having that extra distance here is important. But what that also means is we've increased the length of this line here, so we're going to have to do something with our sleeve pattern. Now, if you imagine, this is going to form part of the sleeve, and so we've got an extra distance here, probably again about maybe 1/4 of an inch, and you'll be able to measure that if you do the example on your full scale pattern. And so we want to make some kind of adjustment into the sleeve to allow this extra length here. Now, bearing in mind, we would normally, on a normal rounded back adjustment, we would fold this section out here. So this would become a dart if we were doing this into the shoulder. So this would kind of fold out. But because if we do that, then this distance won't match this distance here when we do the sleeve. We're going to have some problems. So you could, if you're using a stretch fabric, you could potentially ease this into the seam. But I did think of a way that you could also then adjust the sleeve, and I have done that on the pattern that I've got. So now if we look at the sleeve pattern, so the sleeve for this would be something like, I'm just going to sketch this out roughly, but the sleeve pattern looks something like this. It goes like that, and then down, and then that, and then down, and then you have your 2 notches on here, for example. So what I've done on my sleeve is I've actually marked where the shoulder is, so worked out kind of how far around the shoulder point is and marked that on the sleeve, and then parallel with the grain line, cut all the way down the pattern. And then I've measured kind of how far down this mark is. So I've made a mark, so it's roughly above, just about an inch above our 2 notches. So made a kind of mark here. And then I've cut across at that point. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut, if you imagine this is the bottom of our sleeve. So we're going to cut all the way up to the top. And then I'm just going to cut the side bit out here. And then cut out from the armhole edge to the line that you've cut, the grain line, kind of the line that's parallel with the grain line. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually increase this. We want to add a little bit of length into this seam here. And what that's also going to do is add a little bit of extra width to go over, again, to go over the shoulder and allow a bit more room over the hump, wherever you need the extra space in the back. So what you would do then is you would put your bit of paper in. Let's take a bit of paper here. So you would mark how big so you'd measure what this distance is here, the extra distance that you need. It's not going to be very large. And then you're just going to keep these 2 lines parallel. So the cuts that you've made are going to stay parallel, but you're just going to move this out until you get the distance that you need in that sleeve opening. Okay, so once you've then done that, you can stick that down. Roughly do mine here. So in case you can't see it, so this is this is the kind of gap that we've created here. So we've added a bit of extra width to the sleeve. And if you didn't want that, if the sleeve's quite wide, you could take that off at this side here. So you could start to taper this in if you wanted to do that, if you didn't want to increase the width of the sleeve. But I find sleeves patterns are quite tight. I tend to struggle. Perhaps I've got big arms or something, but I'm never sorry to have a little bit of extra room in a sleeve. And now you'll notice that we've got a little extra distance here, which means that this line will now match up with the extra distance that we've added in this top section here. Okay, so and what you're going to need to do is you'll notice it doesn't quite, this juts out a little bit, so you'll just need to blend that line a little bit. So you'll take a little bit off one side and then the other, and then you can cut your sleeve pattern. And if they were to scale, then you would find that if you then walk them out, the notches should still match up and the gaps should still match up, and that would all work. Okay, so just to recap then, so you're going to do I would stick a piece of paper on and almost like imitate the sleeve, the normal sleeve opening that you would have on a set-in sleeve. Draw your line out as if it would go to the armhole, make your normal rounded back adjustment, and then you'll see how big this gap becomes. Then cut that extra bit off, so because you don't need that anymore, but you've then got the measure of the distance. And then on your sleeve pattern, mark a line where the shoulder is, the center of the shoulder, cut the pattern up to the neckline, and then cut in from the arm, from the sleeve seam into the center, and then open that out so that this gap then matches the extra length that you need in this back seam. And all of that then will stop it, because then this adjusts, you'll notice it slightly adjusts the neckline so that that's going to come, so it will then create the same effect as a dart really. So it will come round your shoulder instead of sticking out, popping out. And then similarly here, we've kept the nice shape that we wanted with the original neckline. So you shouldn't find this, like I did, you shouldn't find this just popping up into your neck. Now, if you're rounding, just lastly, if your rounding is just in the top section, then all you need to do from the books that I've read are, if this is our pattern for the back, oops, so that should go more like that. And then down and out and down. So this is our back pattern. Then you might find that all you need to do is do your line across. What they did on the example I saw was they literally just popped that up, but I think then you're going to end up, you'll have to ease the neckline in if you do that. Sorry, I don't think you can see that on this drawing. I'll just do that again. So what they did was they just literally cut from the centre back out to the side. They added this on, and they didn't really talk about what adjustment they made for the back, centre back. There were two options, I think. So if we, let me just cut this one out as well so you can see the options. Okay, so in this example, if you do just cut out to here and add, so the example I saw, literally just had this cut out and then they just added the adjustment in here. But what that's going to do is take you off, I'll just do it off the paper. So if you notice, this is lined up with the line on my cutting mat. If you do add width in there, it's going to take you off the centre back line. So you need to just think about how you want to accommodate for that. Now, if it's only a small amount, and sometimes if the rounding is at the top of the neck, you'll see it's not a huge amount. So we've only got a little bit of increase here. Then what you could do is you could ease that into the neckband. So you could still draw your centre back seam kind of as a straight line in this example. So you can see this very well. So if we line that up with the back, then what you could do is you could just draw this all the way up, and then it means that you're just going to have a wider, add this extra on at the neck. If you do that, I'll just bring this in. If you do this, then obviously your neckline is going to be a bit wider. The other option is if you add it in here, then you could potentially take it off here. So you could then make a similar adjustment so you keep the neck the same. So you could then just remove whatever that extra is that you've added there. So then it keeps the neckline the same. But I think you might struggle kind of doing that. The other option is that you could cut as if you were doing the dart like we did before. So we could cut down there. That's just a really small dart into the neckline. Then in this case, you can keep the centre back on the centre back and open this out. And again, you could measure the dart width here, and you could, again, this is what I did originally, you could then just take the extra off the side. So you keep the same line and the same length for the sleeve seam, but you lose the dart. Or alternatively, you could put a dart in. Again, it depends on how big an adjustment that you need and how high up it is and so on. Stretch fabric's a bit more forgiving. So, sometimes it's possible to get the shaping just using the stretch of the fabric. Okay. So quite a few bits to go through there, and I hope that that made sense. If not, then just give me a shout. But it was a bit easier to do it by showing you than it was to try and write out some instructions. So hopefully you find that useful. If you have any more questions, then just email me and I'm happy to answer. And yeah, let me know how you get on. I'll be really interested to see. I'm hoping that it makes a difference on my next raglan top, and I'd love to see what you're making. Okay, well, bye for now.